cornerback position, really the third most important position on a 53-man roster. Think of it this way. Quarterback, pass rusher, cover, corner. They're all the rage now. They come in all shapes and sizes. Bigger is better in today's NFL. But we'll just run through some of the things you want to look at here at corner in particular. Just like with linebackers, key and diagnosis is important at cornerback. It's important at the secondary level, period, because you do have run-pass conflicts every play. Corners are important in the run defense in terms of their run fits, especially when they are hard-forced players on the outside on the perimeter. So these guys are not just out there running around playing basketball and trying to shadow receivers around. They need to know what's going on as far as run pass, and they need to be able to determine that quickly so they can play their run responsibilities, be a part of the run front if necessary, or get into their pass coverage responsibilities quickly too. So they have to be dialed in at the snap, and you need to be able to determine with corners whether or not they have their eyes where they need to be and whether or not they're executing those fundamentals and those responsibilities quickly and appropriately. When you get into the coverage phase of things, though, and the key and diagnosis led you to the passing game, this is where corners make their money, and this is what corners are paid for. There's really 4 different things that you're looking at when you're looking at corners. How do they play press? How do they play off? How do they play man from press and zone from press? And how do they play man from off and zone from off? Those are really the 4 different things you're looking at here. We'll start with press coverage. Press coverage, whether you're playing man or zone, is about patience at the line of scrimmage. It doesn't make any sense for corners to get up on the line of scrimmage and press if all they're doing once the ball is snapped is opening their hips and really giving away the advantage that they're trying to create by lining up at press in the first place. So we'll take press from a man perspective. You want to look at corners who, when the ball is snapped, you're seeing their bodies stay square, you're seeing their feet remain calm, but you're seeing their hands react quickly, which means ball snapped, hands come up, and they're using the proper hand to jam wide receivers, disrupt releases, disrupt timing at the line of scrimmage, make wide receivers run lateral, or jam them up so bad that they're holding them at the line of scrimmage. And this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're doing this really playing man or zone. Now, the time you're really going to hard jam and play press when you're talking about zone is really cover 2. And then you're playing it with outside in integrity. You're seeing cornerbacks align outside shade of the wide receiver, trying to funnel them inside. But the fundamentals that they need to execute with their feet and their hands remain the same, which means good patience with your feet, not opening your hips, sliding laterally to mirror wide receivers along the line of scrimmage if necessary, but staying square and not opening your hips. That's the key. Being quick with your hands. When you're playing man from press from there, it's about settling into a good lateral position on them from a leverage perspective, which means you want to stay even to slightly behind them when you're trailing them down the field. You want to see guys who don't get too high on them vertically, okay? Meaning they don't get too far ahead of them, because when you're too far ahead of a wide receiver, he can undercut you, he can push you off downfield and come back to the football. You want to see a guy who's able to stay in good shadow, semi-trail position, and then be able to anticipate route breaks, run the routes with wide receivers, which means they have to have good hips, good foot quickness, good body control, and then finish on the football, which means stay in position, make sure they're in phase with a wide receiver, meaning they got them under control, make sure they're able to close coming out of the break if, in fact, there was some separation that was created, and then look for the football, go for the football, create the pass breakup, finish with the interception if the opportunity presents itself. These are all the things that you see the great ones do, that you see Darrelle Revis do, that you see Patrick Peterson do, that you see Richard Sherman do, Joe Hayden. When they're lined in press, patient at the line, quick hands, good trail man shadow position, good route anticipation, good body control coming out of the break, not grabbing, pulling, throwing guys on the ground. Especially in 2014, you're not going to be able to see a whole lot of that because there's going to be an increased emphasis on calling pass interference, calling defensive holding down the field. But guys who can just stay with receivers and stay with all the different types of receivers, whether they're the Brandon Cooks type or the Calvin Johnson type, because there's a whole bunch of there's a wide variety of wide receivers that corners have to cover. Their skills have to be such that they can handle all the different types. Now, playing off coverage, whether it's man or zone, a little bit different. You don't see a whole lot of off coverage in the NFL nowadays. Everything is about press. Everything is about press and then bail. And that's something I didn't really hit on when I was talking about press. But when I'm talking about press and bail, I'm saying guys who get up at the line of scrimmage, look like it's going to be pressed, but then just open their hips and run at the snap, and then kind of play their techniques with their hips already open, backs to the sideline, keying through the wide receiver to the quarterback, and trying to play coverage from there. I personally don't like that type of technique. I think it limits a lot of the things you can do as far as covering outside breaking routes because your hips are already locked to playing inside, but nevertheless it's something that you will see. I'm going to talk about off-man coverage, and from off-man coverage I mean how does a guy line up 7 to 9 yards, whether it's man or zone, away from the wide receiver. What does his pedal look like? Meaning his back pedal, meaning does he keep his pads down? Does he have good cadence with his feet? Meaning he doesn't look like a drum majorette and pounding the ground and he's running backward, but it's a nice, smooth, methodical flow to it. Does he have good hips? Does he have good transition quickness coming out of his breaks? Transition quickness often comes with route recognition. The quicker you can recognize routes, the quicker you and more confident you can break. Do you have good closing quickness? Do you understand the concept of closing to the receiver first and then looking for the football? If you watch defensive backs who play off man or zone coverage, and man or zone coverage, by the way, kind of runs together. Even though it looks like zone, it can be man. Or rather, I'll say it the opposite way. Even though it looks like man, it can actually be a zone coverage that turns into man coverage. Really, for the sake of this conversation, we're not going to get into a lot of those nuances because they're really hard to decipher between the two unless you really know how these things are being taught. But when you're talking about off-man coverage, again, you're talking about a guy's ability to pedal, a guy's ability to understand where routes are going to break, which then will translate into good transition efficiency, good closing quickness. You want to see guys close on the man first and then look for the football, and then finishing skills. Can he get PBUs? Can he make the interceptions when they're there to be made? And then his tackling. Can a guy on the corner get receivers on the ground? Even though corners are paid to cover, tackling is still a fundamental part of the game. When you're talking about the best corners in the National Football League right now, Darrelle Revis will tackle you, Richard Sherman will hit you, Patrick Peterson can do a better job of hitting you, but he will hit you too, and Joe Hayden will light you up. So tackling is not something that is to be overlooked, but these are the things you really want to look for when you're looking at corners. How do they play press? How patient are they with their feet? How good are they with their hands? How good are they at shadowing receivers down the field? And then off-man coverage. How good are they in their pedal? Are they smooth? Are they efficient? Do they have good hips? Do they have good feet when they're driving on the ball? And then do they have good closing quickness and ability to finish? These are the things you want to look at in a nutshell. A lot more intricate detail you can get into with this position, but these are the things you need to look at when you're evaluating corners.